Hi everyone, welcome back to the Laravel 9 Basic Beginners course. This is episode 8. In the previous episode, we talked about the model. We created a total data and we're able to access the list and collections of data. So in this episode, we're going to be doing furthermore changes to our database, and we're going to be able to show a single data, update a single data, and as well delete a data from the database via the API. Okay, so let's get started. Um, so as you remember, this was where we stopped in the last episode. We're supposed to have you're supposed to have a postman. We're able to create the data by sending a post request to the route, as well as we're able to access all the data that we have in our to-dos. And as you can see, we have three data here. This is a collection of data and all that. So in this episode, we want to show a single data. We want to be able to update and as well to delete a specific data from database. All right. As you remember, I had table access. I'm going to refresh this, and we have three data here. All right. So let's go ahead to show a single data. Now, when we want to access a single data, we want to actually say show that data we're looking for and not any other data, right? So in order to do this, we're going to, first of all, we want to say to do, we want to look for the data, if that data exists. And in order to look for that data, we know that we have to work with our to-do model. And remember, the model is like a table. So we're saying to do find, okay? And we want to say find all of this, like find a particular data by its ID. All right. I mean, if you think about it here, if you look at this data, what do you think it's unique between all of this? You can see that the ID is actually unique. And even though we have the status that is unique here at the moment, but status could change, so you wouldn't be able to do that to find one specific data by that. A unique data by that. So we'll probably want to use that ID. All right. So if we wanted to look for, let's say we want to look for, study the new language two, we want to view it. So ideally we would pass, study new language two here. Find two, and then we're going to return, as you remember, response. Okay, what JSON? Yep, and then we want to pass in the data, and we want to say we want to send rather to do. Okay. And right now, I'm ad coding this just to give you guys a basic understanding of what's going on. We'll change this into a request shortly. If we go back to the API, remember we do not have a route for this, and we don't have a way to pass this. So in order for us to do this, if you remember in the previous episode, just like we did with if you remember, just like we did with uh, the name when we're able to pass a name parameter. So that's what we're going to do here as well. So we want to be able to pass a parameter. Now I can easily say ID, okay, or something to get and all of that. I could as well make this optional by passing in the question mark sign, but we need this ID, so this is actually needed. And if you remember, we want this to go to the show method. If you remember correctly, it's show, okay, and all that. So if I were to send this request, we have to create a new request, all right? So let's do that. Great. And we want this to be, and then slash, I don't know. We're going to use any details for now, right now, because we're not validating this, okay? So I'm just going to put something like this, all right? And pretty much that's it. We're going to send, okay, and all that. So in order to send that, we're going to send that request, and hopefully we should get the data for two. Now we're getting, you can see this is a success response. I'm going to save this. I'm going to rename this to show to do, and so we have a show to do now, and we have just this. I mean, we have this data. Um, right now, we are not validating this, and no matter what number we put in here, it's always going to give us this, right? And in order for us to do this, we could come down here, okay, and then we could take in the requests, all right? Remember, you always have to take the request first, and then we could take in ID, all right? So this ID, remember, this variable, this has to match the same name of whatever you're sending in here, okay? It has to match, all right? Like whatever you're sending in here has to match same name here, all right? So we're taking in ID. So now we could say we want to switch this ID, down here. Now, if I were to pass this to, let's say, one, and I said, remember the last data we had was two. I mean, the data that we got, the collection was two. Now we got one. This works, right? And all of that. Now, if I were to pass this, wrong data, it doesn't exist. We might actually get an error. But then, I mean, Laravel, I think based on the new version of Laravel, we're getting a null. Usually before when I mean, you get a null when you don't have any data and all of that. There's a way of saying, okay, I want to fail if we don't get any data, which is find or fail. If you use that method and we were to send this request, it's going to fail. It's going to tell you not found. All right, and all of that, which is because the data is not. We can't find this data. Do you understand? So there are ways to do this when it comes to API request and all of that. Um, right now, I'm not going to go too much into that because that's a bit advanced, but I'm going to show you a simpler way. I mean, a shorter way to do this. And this is what we call route model binding in Laravel. So Laravel has the ability to actually find this data, and return this data by itself. All we have to do is to pass to right here and say, hey, we want to get to do. We could call it, I would call it to do. We could actually still call it ID and still write model binding, but I'm just going to call it to do. All right. And how we'll do that is we'll come here and would say, hey, we want to get to do, which is our model to do. Right? So what this means is that this would automatically look for this data, and if it finds it, it's going to return it. But if it doesn't, it's going to fail. Now, instead of having this line here, I could easily just delete all of this, and we could have something as this. I mean, simple, right? And pretty straightforward as well. So if we were to send this, this should also throw an error of not found. Okay, so automatically it's doing this, it's doing the find or fail thing for us behind the scene. And if we were to send in a data that exists or an ID that exists, it's going to return the data that we're looking for. All right, so we're just going to leave it as this because this is actually what we want and how we want it and all that. Now, the next thing we're going to be doing is updating this data. So, I mean, now we've done a tags, we need to update the tags from, we want to, change it to status, or for example, we made a mistake. We want to change the text. We spelled something wrongly. We want to change that. But of course, we need to be able to do that. So as you remember, we're going to be using the update for this because, I mean, it's self-explanatory. We want to update this data. And in HTTP requests, usually when you want to update the data, you do not use get or post, but rather you use a method called put. Okay, that's what you use. But before we get there and then put that in our route, first of all, let's create in the request. Remember, whenever you want to insert data, you want to validate this data, and it's only good practice to actually move this validation away from the controller and have it situated in its own class, which is having like the store to do request. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another one. If you got it, it's going to be make request, and we're going to call this what? We're going to say update to do request. Okay. Now we're going to create this the update to the request. And as you remember, the first thing you want to do is you want to authorize this request and say, hey, I want this request to be authorized. Okay. And then we return true. And then the next thing is we want to pass in the rules. And if you remember, what we want is we want to have the store, or the tags and the status. So I'm just going to copy this right here. But rather, instead of making this required, I'm just going to make this to sometimes. Okay, which is, hey, if you're sending the data to update this and you're sending only the text, no problem. If you're sending the data to update this and you're sending only the status, no problem, right? And for us, this is Boolean, right? And sometimes, remember. So this will literally saying, hey, okay, we can update the data if this both of this exists, validate or do nothing, right? And all of that. So now that we have the rule set, if we go back to our controller, remember we want to pass in this rule into our method as a parameter. So first we're going to bind it to the request to update to do request. And remember that you want to like import it, which is the use app HTTP request update to the request. For me, for my VS Code, I have this automatically done for me, which makes things easier. There are plugins you can use for this. But then if you don't have it, you can easily just, type this at the top, and then you could put this here. Okay. So now that we have that, I also want to update a model or data, but we also need to know what data we're updating. So we're going to also do the same thing we did for show. We're going to put the to do model, and we're going to say to do. So what we're literally saying is, hey, we want to update a particular model, and we want to automatically have that model inside for us so that we can update it. I mean, if this wasn't here, what would happen is we'd have to start doing things like what we did earlier on, where we get to say to do, and then we're doing find, and after finding this data, we're going to come down and say to do, and then we want to update this data, right? And all that. Now, but we don't want to go through, the whole stress of looking for that. So let me just return a response here. Remember response JSON, and remember the data is going to be data, and we'll want this to be to do. I mean, whatever it is we're done doing, but we want to return the to do, right? Uh, something wrong. Let me still click past and enter here. Okay. Uh, yeah. So we have the to do, and I don't want us to do this because we don't need this, but assuming we didn't have this, it means that we would have to take in the parameter and do the find with the ID thing again, and then before doing this. So I'm not going to do that. We could easily do this. Okay. And for this, if you remember, just like we did for the store request, it's pretty similar. It's pretty simple. We just have to pass in the request, and we're saying request validated. Remember? Now, if we do not want to do validated, then we could as well, pass in each individual data by creating an array, and then say tags is equal going to be this, which is request tags. But if you do it this way, you probably want to ensure that you always send in the tax details. Why? Because I mean, tax could be null, and if you were to try to do this without sending in the tax, this is going to return null and update your data to be null. Whereas that's not what you want, right? So for this, I'm just going to go back and I'm just going to use request validated, and that would ensure that it would only put in information that was actually passed in, and not change fields that we actually do not want to be changed. Okay. So in order to test this out, let's test this out. Remember, we have to create a route. We're done with show. Let's create a new one. And as you remember, for headers, we're going to also put in accept, and we're going to say application JSON. Okay. I'm going to call this update to do, and this is going to be a put request. Now we have put or patch. They're pretty much the same thing. It all depends on what you want. You could either use put or patch. Both of them are methods that are actually used for updating data when it comes to the API. Okay, so I'm just going to call this put. I'm just going to put this as a put request. I'm going to take in data, and then as you already know, just like what we had for the show, we want to pass in the ID of the data we want to update. And then now we also want to pass in what we want to update for the data. Okay, so I'm going to pull this tags, and I'm going to put in status. Okay, so for now, I'm just going to, pass in only status. Let's say the study a new course. Okay, I'm going to just put these for now, and I'm just going to save this. Now, if I were to send this won't work. Maybe I should, so you get to see the kind of errors that you'd get, so you understand that it says this put method is not supported for this route. This way, you're able to tell that you haven't created the endpoint. You have to go create the endpoint, and you need to check that you're actually doing the right thing over here. Okay, so for this, I'm going to copy this, and I'm just going to paste it, and I'm going to say slash to do as well, but I want this to go to update, as well as I want this to be a put request and not a get request. Okay, so now if I were to send this, remember, when we got, I'm going to close this, and we'll go to show. What we have for our data is we had one. I mean, for data I of ID one, our status is currently false, which is 0. And then for this, we want to update it to true, which is 1. Okay, so if we were to click send, if everything being all right, we should be have been able to update the data. As you can see, status now is now 1. If I were to refresh the show, you could see that it returns 1. And take note of something, that these data, the time span, I mean, if you saw that shift over here, the time that this was created at is quite different from the time that this was updated at. You can see that this has been updated at, right? And all of that. But let's remember something. We have a field called completed at. And what we want to do is we want to say that whenever the status of this field becomes true, we want to say that this has been completed, right? And all that. But if we go down to our request, you can notice that we're actually not taking this into consideration, right? So we actually do not need it right here. Rather, what we want to do is in our controller, okay, we're going to do a check and say that if this, status is true, okay, we're going to also, update the completed app. Do you understand me? So we could easily say, we could actually do this in a wrap statement. An if wrap it in an if statement, and we're going to say if request status, right, is equal to true, and we're going to say to do update, and then we want to pass in an array, and what we want to update is we want to update the completed out field, and we want to pass it in like we want it to be a time. Okay, and we're going to say does. So this is a shorthand for saying telling in Laravel that we can use to get a time. This is just saying now. It's quite self-explanatory. Now, it's just saying now. It's just giving the time span, the timestamp of now, which is when this code is being updated or when this code is running. Just giving the time span of now, timestamp rather. So if was saying that if this request status is true, then we want this to be now, okay, and all that. Uh, what we could do, I think, if we were to do this, this should work. Right now we have null, remember, and if we were to update this and just send this request again, that didn't work. Okay, now this is where it becomes okay. We didn't save our file. Okay, we didn't save our file. Let's try that again. I just saved the file now, and as you can see, the completed is working. So we're saying that whenever if this was true, update this. One was sending an update request, okay, and all of that. Um, Ideally, in most cases, I mean, you need to have the flexibility. So for now, I'm just going to say let's change. Let's change something. I don't want us to change. Let's change the title, the tags for tags two, which is the ID of two, and I want to change it from study a new language of two to what do we have? Study a new language two, and I want to change it down to study a new course. Okay, so this is the status of zero. I could, just decide I could send this or I could leave it as this. It doesn't really matter because both of them are still false. And I could just send this, okay, which is updating and saying, hey, we want to change this to study a new course. As you can see, the ID here is currently two. If we go back down here and it's currently study a new language, if we were to refresh the data, we get to see that this has been updated to study a new course. Checking the database as well, just to be sure. And if we're to reload this, we can see that one of them has the completed ad and the other one has a new tax, which is study a new course. Okay, so pretty much that's how you update a data. It's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Laravel has done a lot of these things to make it simpler for us to get this data rolling and all that. So lastly, we want to talk about destroy, to destroy a data, which is to delete a particular data. Now, in order for us to delete a data, we also want to, pass in the date, which is the to do, what to do we want to delete, and all of that. So I'm just going to create a new request here, and I'm going to, what do we want to pass in the route, okay? And this is going to be a delete request, okay? And for the headers, I also want to accept application JSON. Okay, I'm going to save this and I'm going to call the delete to do. Okay, so this you can see that Postman, it tells you what type of request. It makes it easy for you to recognize what type of request this is. So this is us literally, we're not passing any parameter for delete, we're just going to pass in the ID. So this is all saying that we want to delete data with the ID of one, right? And of course, if we send those requests, we're going to get an error that it doesn't exist. Why? Because, the method doesn't exist because we don't have a route created for this. So we're just going to do this now and we're going to change this to delete, okay? And then we're going to change here to delete as well. Sorry, destroy rather. Okay, I'm going to save that. And if I were to send this, this should ideally delete the data from our database, but we're currently not handling it. So sending this will probably just return a blank, blank request. Okay, yeah. So in order for us to do this, remember we want to take in the to do which is first of all, let's take in request, and then we want to take in the to do. Okay, and we want to just say it's pretty. This is pretty simple and straightforward. This is, I guess, the shortest. Delete, and we want to return a response. Now, I'm going to return a different type of response here, and JSON, and uh, data is empty, and then we want status to be 201. Sorry, is it 201 or 202? I think it's 202. Let's check that. So in API requests, I mean in HTTP methods and requests and responses, we usually you want to send in a HTTP code, no content. 205. Okay. Now, it also, I think, just so you know, I think Laravel has a HTTP class. Okay, let's just do 204. Okay, let's not waste time. But I think Laravel has there's actually a class you could actually use to access what just put the response and then type of response, and you can put it in here. So this is no content, and this is literally saying that, hey, okay, we successfully deleted it, but we don't have any data to pass back to you. Usually, the appropriate way as well for creating a data, when you create a data, you actually do not want to pass it. I mean, following standard practices, you probably would return a response of 201, which is the data has been accepted, and if everything goes right, it has been created. Okay, I'm just going to change this to match that, which is 201 accepted, and then we have 204 no contact. Now, these are all both success responses. 200 is the standard success response, and that is what we're going to return in update as well as store, okay, and all that, as well as show as of course an index. So, but pretty much this is it. So now, if I were to send this request, now I should just for recap, uh, visiting or trying to view a single data with the ID of one works. And if I were to delete this now, and if you take note of this, we have 200 here. Now we've got 204 no content. It means that we've deleted our data successfully. If I were to, try to access this one more time, now we are getting a 404, right? Not found. I'm just going to, I'm not sure if I added this. I mean, I'm just adding it for because I think we added it for the other guys and we didn't put it here and all that. So you can see now that it returns a different kind of message rather than showing that HTML. It's going to return a JSON telling you that the message for this is that there is no query for the result. Okay, and all that. So let's see. View auto do's. I'm not sure if I added that here. Okay. I'm just going to update all of our routes to have this application JSON header. So we all know that they all accept JSON. So that way Laravel knows that all of these requests are JSON based requests. Okay. Uh, accept. Did I think we have the, I think we did this. Yep, JSON. Okay, so pretty much this is it. We've been able to do an index, the index is create all the data and then show, view a single data, store data, and update to update the data and destroy. Now, lastly, let's talk about the routes. Now we have all of this here, right? In Laravel, there's a simpler way to do this. I mean, we have one, two, three, four, five. That's a lot of data, and in Laravel we could easily do this. But before we do that, if you remember in one of the episodes, I told you about uh, viewing your routes. Okay, so PHP artisan, if you remember the command route list, I'm going to pass a flag here because I don't want to see uh, vendor except vendor. I don't want to see other routes apart from these routes here. Okay, and basically you could see that we have routes and you can see our API routes here and you can see our web routes. Okay, and you can see that we have a get request of API slash to do. We have a post request. We have this, which is the show. We have this, which is the put. We have this, which is the delete. Okay, so in order to do this, a simpler way to do this is to simply uh, create something called a resource. So if we say route, we want this to be an API resource, okay? And then the name is going to be to do, okay? And then the class is going to be to do controller class. Now, if we created, I mean, let's run this first, and you can see something real quick. As you can see, what we had earlier on is pretty much the same thing as what we have now. Uh, I don't know what's wrong with my. Okay, you know what? Sorry, guys. Okay, and all right. Now you can see here over here that we have these routes and these routes. And if you take note, they're pretty much the same thing, right? The only difference is we didn't pass names for our routes here at this point in time because we didn't need them. But pretty much this, what this does is literally the same thing that we had. But one thing is important. These names are actually, same names with the names we called our method. So they have to match for this to automatically do this. There are other ways to actually parse a custom method to read, but you get the idea. For the resource, for you to use the API resource, they have to be matching names for the methods. So over here, you can see the destroy will go to destroy, and that's the same thing as we had in delete, which we had to destroy. The update will go to update, the show, and so on and so forth. So this is actually like, just one line. And if we were to take this out and test all of this, let's delete two. I mean, right? All right, first of all, let's create a new one and we can delete that one. Okay. And then for the body, we're going to say study new language 4, going to send. And now we should get a response of 201 created. Now, if we go back to show and we want to show ID of 4, this should give us the data, right? Good, good. And that still works. And also, if you were to go over to view all to-dos, as you can see, it still works and gives us 4, which means everything is still working. And then if we go to updates and we want to update the data with the ID of 4, and we want to change it to study a new course. And as you can see, we've changed that data to study a new course as well. Then finally, we could try to delete these data. I don't know why there's save and override. Thank you. We want to delete an ID of 4, and we want to send that, as well as we want to show, and then yeah, you get the 204. And now we want to view it again. We should return not found because we've deleted our data. Yes. So now you can see that everything still works, and you just have to ensure that the methods you actually have over here actually match it. Now, it's not. This isn't something that you always have to do. This is just when you know you have to. I mean, so as not to, keep just to keep things simple and faster. You do not have to uh what's it called? You don't have to, repeat all of the routes individually over here. You can easily just give it an API resource if you have this. Now, there's also another method called resource, but it includes two additional methods, and that is for when you're working with, you have pages to show and all of that. So I'm going to clean this up. I'm going to take this out because we don't need to pass that parameter anymore and all that. But pretty much, yeah, that's it. We have our data. We're able to confirm that our data works. We've been able to make a post request, a put request, a get request. We've been able to view all to dos. We've been able to create an individual to do, update it, and delete it as well. And pretty much, I think that's it. And I'll see you in the next episode, which is going to be the last episode. And thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.